Hey everyone, welcome to a deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at self-care. So we're dissecting this piece. It's called The Importance of Self-Care, How to Prioritize Yourself for a Better Life.
Oh, cool.
And let me tell you, it's not just about bubble baths
Hmm.
and, face masks and stuff like that.
Mm.
Remember that time I tried to power through that crazy work week just on like coffee and willpower,
Yeah.
It didn't end well. Like I was a walking stress ball.
Yeah.
And my productivity tanked. And then I ended up getting sick. And that's when it really hit me, that neglecting self-care, it isn't tough. It's actually setting myself up for failure.
Yeah. What's fascinating is we misinterpret self-care as selfish indulgence, but it's actually the opposite.
Right.
Think of it like this. You can't run a car on an empty tank, right?
Okay.
Self-care is about refueling. So you can show up fully, not just for yourself, but for everything and everyone in your life.
I like that, the car analogy. That clicks way better than the empty cup one for me.
Yeah.
It's about like sustainable energy, not just temporary fixes. So how do we actually make self-care happen? This article breaks it down into physical, emotional, mental, and social. Let's start with the physical stuff, but I want to level up from just the usual advice.
Absolutely. Let's go beyond the eat your veggies.
Yeah.
We know exercise is good. But
Yeah.
did you know, even a brisk walk, it triggers a flood of endorphins? You know those mood-boosting chemicals that give you that runner's high? It's like a natural antidepressant built into our bodies.
I like it. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's not just go exercise. It's understanding the why. That makes it way more motivating.
Exactly. And when it comes to food, it's not just about healthy versus unhealthy. It's
Yeah.
about understanding food as fuel.
Mhm.
Imagine trying to run that car on sugary soda instead of high-octane gasoline.
Oh, yeah?
You're going to sputter and stall.
Right.
Fruits, veggies, lean protein, those are your premium
Yeah.
fuel sources for sustained energy and focus.
That makes sense. I definitely notice a difference
Yeah.
in my energy levels when I'm eating well.
Hmm.
And speaking of energy, let's not forget the MVP of physical self-care, sleep.
Oh, yeah. Sleep is the ultimate system reboot. Those 7 to 8 hours aren't just about feeling rested. They're crucial for memory, consolidation, emotional regulation, even hormonal balance.
Wow.
Simp on sleep, and you're essentially running on a glitching operating system.
I like that. Okay, so we've got the physical tune-up down, but self-care is more than just a physical tune-up. It's about understanding the emotional landscape too. How do we do that without getting lost in feelings?
That's where mindfulness comes in. Right. Not just meditation, although that's a great tool,
Yeah.
but the ability to just observe your emotions without judgment. It's like hitting pause on that inner critic that says, you shouldn't be feeling this way.
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
I've tried meditation. It's harder than it looks.
It is, yeah.
But even just taking a few deep breaths when I'm stressed, it does help.
Exactly. Even small steps make a difference. And another powerful tool is journaling. It's not just Dear Diary stuff. It's about getting those thoughts and feelings out of your head and onto paper.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be surprised how much clarity that can blow.
Yeah, it's like decluttering your mental closet.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes just seeing it written down helps me process things, Dorn.
Hi.
Okay, before we jump into the mental side of things,
Mm-hmm.
this article talks a lot about boundaries. Is that really self-care, or is that just being assertive?
Boundaries are essential self-care and often the most overlooked.
Okay.
It's not about being rude. It's about recognizing your limits and communicating them clearly. If you're constantly saying yes to things that drain you, you're essentially saying no to your own well-being.
That hits home. I used to feel guilty saying no,
Mm.
but I've realized it's not about letting others down. It's about protecting my own energy so I can show up better for the things I choose to say yes to.
Precisely. And boundaries aren't just about people-pleasing. They apply to our digital lives, too. Think about those times you get sucked into social media or endless scrolling. Setting boundaries with technology can be incredibly freeing.
I am so guilty of that. Maybe a digital detox should be on my self-care menu.
Okay.
Let's shift gears and talk about the mental aspect of self-care. We've covered body and emotions, but what about keeping our minds sharp and engaged?
Yes. Mental self-care is like cross-training for your brain. We're not talking about endless Sudoku puzzles, although those are great, but about engaging your mind in ways that challenge you and spark curiosity.
Okay.
Think learning a new language, picking up a musical instrument, even diving into a fascinating nonfiction book, anything that pushes you beyond your mental comfort zone.
Oh, so it's like heating the gym, but for our brains, building those cognitive muscles.
Exactly.
Makes sense. I always feel more energized and creative after I like learn something new.
Exactly. And just like our bodies need rest after workout, our minds need breaks too. Especially in our hyper-connected world, stepping away from screens, taking a walk in nature, these aren't just breaks, they're opportunities for our brains to reset and recharge.
I've noticed that too. Like when I take a break from work and go for a walk, I come back and I have all these fresh ideas
Yeah.
and a much clearer perspective. It's like hitting the refresh button on my creativity.
And another crucial aspect of mental self-care is cultivating a positive mindset. This isn't about ignoring challenges or slapping on a fake smile. It's about choosing to focus on solutions and possibilities. It's that can-do attitude that helps you navigate challenges with resilience and hope.
So it's less about toxic positivity
Hmm.
and more about that inner cheerleader who's like, okay, this is tough, but I can handle it.
Exactly. It's about harnessing the power of perspective to shift your focus from problems to potential. And speaking of potential, let's talk about the social aspect of self-care. We often think of self-care as a solo activity, but relationships play a huge role.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely feel more recharged after spending quality time with people who, like, lift me up. But how does that fit into the self part of self-care?
Think of it this way. We're social creatures, wired for connection. Supportive relationships provide a sense of belonging, reduce stress, and boost our mood. It's like having a built-in support system that helps us navigate life's ups and downs.
So it's not just about having fun with friends, it's about nurturing those connections that make us feel seen and understood.
Exactly. And open communication is key to that. Being able to share your thoughts and feelings honestly, to truly listen to others without judgment, that's what builds strong, resilient relationships.
I love that. It's about creating a safe space where you can be your authentic self without fear of judgment. But what about those times when we need more than just a friendly ear?
That's where seeking professional support comes in. Whether it's a therapist, counselor, or support group, reaching out for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It's about acknowledging that we don't always have to go it alone.
Yeah, that's such an important reminder. We often think of self-care as something we do on our own, but sometimes it's about recognizing when we need extra support. Okay, we've covered the 4 pillars of self-care: physical, emotional, mental, and social. But how do we actually make this happen in our busy lives? It can feel overwhelming to add even more to our to-do lists.
You're absolutely right. That's why it's crucial to approach self-care with a mindset shift. It's not another item on your checklist. It's about weaving a small, consistent actions into your daily routine. Think micro habits, not grand overhauls.
Okay, I like that. It's less about I have to meditate for an hour every day and more about like, can I squeeze in 5 minutes of deep breathing before bed?
Exactly. It's about finding those little pockets of time and making them count. Swap doom scrolling for 5 minutes of stretching. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Pack a healthy lunch instead of grabbing takeout. Small changes, big impact over time.
It's like that saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. We don't have to become self-care gurus overnight. It's about those consistent baby steps that move us in the right direction.
And as you start to experience the benefits of these small actions, you'll naturally feel more motivated to incorporate more. It becomes a positive cycle of self-care reinforcement.
That makes sense. But even with the best intentions, life gets in the way. Any tips for staying on track with those self-care habits?
One of the most effective strategies is to actually schedule your self-care. Just like any other important appointment, block out those 15 minutes for yoga, that 30-minute walk, even just 10 minutes of uninterrupted reading.
Okay, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
I'm definitely the type who lets self-care slip when things get hectic. But if it's in my calendar, it feels more like a commitment I need to honor.
Exactly. It elevates self-care from a should-do to a must-do, just like that important meeting or deadline. And just like any skill, consistency is key. It's much more effective to have short, regular bursts of self-care than trying to cram it all in once a week and then neglecting it for the rest.
So we're talking about creating a self-care routine, not just a random act of kindness to ourselves every now and then, but with all the different aspects we've talked about: physical, emotional, mental. How do we even start building that routine?
Think of it like creating a personalized self-care menu. What are your non-negotiables? A 20-minute walk every morning, 10 minutes of journaling before bed. Start with 1 or 2 things that feel manageable and build from there.
I love that, a self-care menu.
Mhm.
It takes the pressure off trying to do everything at once. But what if my needs change or I hit a slump and my routine feels stale?
Flexibility is key. Your self-care routine should evolve with you. If something's not working, swap it out. Try new things, listen to your body and mind. They'll tell you what they need.
So it's not about finding the perfect routine. It's about creating a system that works for you and being open to adapting it as you go.
Exactly. Self-care is a journey, not a destination. And it's important to remember that self-care is not selfish. It's actually an act of empowerment. That allows us to show up more fully in all areas of our lives. When we take care of ourselves, we're better equipped to care for others, pursue our goals, and navigate the challenges that life throws our way.
That's such a powerful reminder. We often think of self-care as something we do for ourselves, but it ripples out into all areas of our lives. It impacts our relationships, our work, our creativity, our resilience, everything.
Absolutely. It's an investment in our overall well-being that pays dividends in countless ways. And speaking of investments, let's talk about boundaries, which are often the most challenging but crucial aspect of self-care.
Yes, we touched on this earlier, but I think it deserves a deeper dive. It's one thing to know we need boundaries, but actually setting them can feel so uncomfortable, especially for people pleasers like me.
You're not alone. Boundaries are essentially the limits we set to protect our time, energy, and emotional well-being. Think of them as your personal guardrails, preventing you from overcommitting and burning out.
So it's about recognizing what we can realistically handle and saying no to the things that drain us, even if it means disappointing someone or going against the grain.
Exactly. And remember, setting boundaries is not selfish. It's an act of self-respect. When we honor our own needs, we're better equipped to show up fully for the things and people that truly matter to us.
I love that reframing. It's not about being rude or dismissive. It's about taking ownership of our time and energy and making conscious choices about how we spend them.
Precisely. And when we set healthy boundaries, we're actually modeling that behavior for others. We're showing them that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being, which ultimately creates a more respectful and sustainable dynamic in all our relationships.
That makes a lot of sense. We often think of boundaries as being about protecting ourselves from others. But you're right, they also benefit the people around us by encouraging them to set their own healthy limits.
Absolutely. It creates a culture of mutual respect and understanding, where everyone feels empowered to prioritize their well-being.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks. How do we actually set boundaries, especially when it feels awkward or uncomfortable?
One of the first steps is to get clear on your own needs and limits. What are your non-negotiables? What are the things that consistently drain your energy or leave you feeling resentful? Once you have a better understanding of your own boundaries, you can start communicating them to others.
So it starts with self-awareness. We need to know our own limits before we can effectively communicate them to others.
Exactly. And when it comes to communicating boundaries, clarity and directness are key. Be clear and concise about what you're willing to do and what you're not.
It's about saying no without feeling guilty or apologetic, right? Like, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not able to commit to that right now.
Exactly. You don't need to justify your boundaries or over-explain yourself. A simple no thank you or I'm not able to do that right now is perfectly sufficient.
That's really reassuring. I think a lot of us feel like we need to have a good reason or excuse for saying no. But you're saying that simply stating our boundary is enough.
Absolutely. And if people push back or try to guilt you into doing something you don't want to do, remember that you have the right to hold firm to your boundaries. It's about respecting yourself and your time.
This is so helpful. Setting boundaries can feel really challenging, but you've provided some really practical tips for making it happen.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, setting boundaries is a skill that takes practice. It might feel awkward or uncomfortable at first, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And the more you honor your own needs, the more empowered you'll feel to create a life that truly aligns with your values and priorities.
Okay, so we've covered the importance of setting boundaries, clarifying our needs, communicating them directly, and holding firm even when it feels challenging. But what about those situations where we feel like we've already overcommitted, like our calendars are overflowing and we're running on fumes? Any advice for navigating those situations?
That's a great question, and something we all experience from time to time. When you find yourself in a situation where you've overcommitted, it's important to take a step back and reassess your priorities. Are there any commitments that you can delegate, reschedule, or even decline?
So it's about being willing to make adjustments, even if it means disappointing someone or admitting that we've taken on too much.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that saying yes to everything often means saying no to yourself and your well-being. And sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves is to release those commitments that are no longer serving us.
That's such a valuable perspective. It's not about being perfect or never making mistakes. It's about being willing to course correct when we realize we're off track.
Precisely. And remember, setting boundaries is an ongoing process. It's not about creating a rigid set of rules and never deviating from them. It's about staying attuned to your needs, communicating them clearly, and making adjustments as needed.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation about boundaries. I think a lot of us struggle with this aspect of self-care, but you provided some really practical guidance for setting healthy limits and protecting our well-being. But let's be real. Boundaries are just one part of the equation. We've talked about the importance of self-care in all its forms, but it's easy to get stuck in the knowing and not the doing. How do we actually make self-care a reality in our lives beyond just setting boundaries?
Yeah, you're so right. It's easy to get stuck in this self-care theory and forget to put it into practice.
Right, exactly. So let's bridge that gap. What are some tangible, actionable self-care practices our listener can start incorporating today?
Think of it like building your own personalized self-care toolkit. We've talked about the broad categories: physical, emotional, mental, and social. But within each, there's a whole universe of practices to explore. The key is to find what truly resonates with you, what feels nourishing and energizing.
I like that. It's not about following a one-size-fits-all prescription. It's about creating a self-care routine that's as unique as you are. So where do we start building this toolkit?
Let's start with physical self-care. We've talked about exercise, but it doesn't have to be about grueling workouts. What activities bring you joy and get your body moving? Maybe it's dancing, hiking, swimming, or simply taking a walk in nature.
Yeah, for me, it's yoga. I've found that it's not just about the physical postures. It's the mindfulness aspect that really helps me connect with my body and quiet my mind.
That's a perfect example of how different self-care practices can overlap and complement each other. Yoga is a wonderful way to combine physical movement with mindfulness, which is essential for emotional well-being.
Exactly. And speaking of mindfulness, I'm always looking for new ways to cultivate a sense of presence and inner peace. Meditation can be challenging for me. So what are some other tools I can add to my mindfulness toolkit?
Meditation is a great practice, and there are so many different types to explore. But if traditional meditation isn't your thing, there are other practices that can be incredibly effective. Journaling, spending time in nature, engaging in creative activities like painting or playing music, even just taking a few moments to savor a cup of tea mindfully. These can all help cultivate a sense of presence and connection.
I love that savoring a cup of tea mindfully.
Yeah.
It's such a simple act, yet it can be so grounding when we approach it with intention. It's about finding those little moments of peace throughout the day.
Precisely. It's about bringing mindfulness to the ordinary and finding the extraordinary in the everyday. And the more we practice mindfulness, the more we cultivate emotional resilience.
Okay, so we've talked about physical self-care and mindfulness practices. What about emotional self-care? What are some things we can do to nourish our emotional well-being, especially during challenging times?
Emotional self-care is all about giving ourselves permission to feel our emotions fully and finding healthy ways to express and process them. We've talked about journaling, which is a great outlet for emotions, but it's also important to engage in activities that bring us joy, whether it's listening to music, dancing, spending time with loved ones, or pursuing a creative hobby.
Yeah, sometimes we forget to make time for those things that light us up. We get so caught up in the daily grind that we lose sight of the activities that bring us joy and nourish our souls.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that self-care isn't about being selfish. It's about taking care of our own needs so that we can show up more fully for others.
That's so true. When we neglect our own well-being, it's like trying to pour from an empty cup. We can't give to others if we haven't taken care of ourselves first.
And remember, self-compassion is an essential part of emotional self-care. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a loved one. We all make mistakes, we all have bad days, and it's okay to be gentle with ourselves during those times.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on self-care and how to make it a tangible part of my life.
It's been a pleasure diving deep into this topic with you. I hope our listener feels empowered to create a self-care practice that truly nourishes their mind, body, and soul.
Absolutely. So, dear listener, as we wrap up this deep dive into self-care, what small act of self-care will you commit to today? Whether it's taking a walk in nature, indulging in a good book, or simply allowing yourself to rest and recharge. Make it a priority. You deserve it.
And remember, the journey to well-being is a marathon, not a sprint. Be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself, and enjoy the ride.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into self-care. Until next time, take good care of yourselves.